I watch a lot of true crime. Who here watches true crime documentaries? Out of all of those documentaries, I'm sure you have seen the ones where the husband or wife begins to feel sick, but they don't know why. It starts with fatigue, headaches they can't get rid of, a migraine that keeps them home from work. Eventually, it's stomach upset and blood in the stool, which eventually sends them to the hospital. The doctors and nurses run tests, but they can't seem to find anything. Yet there's always one nurse who's always slightly suspicious, right? They get sent home and they begin to feel better for the next few weeks until they start to get sick again. They end up back in the hospital with all the same symptoms, except this time they don't make it. Everyone around them is sad and overly confused. And the living spouse goes on to collect a giant life insurance policy that was mysteriously and conveniently taken out a few months prior. The spouse is living a lavish life with someone new, of course, until a few months later when the toxicology reports come out. And they found a trace amount of a chemical in the body that was slowly poisoning this person. The spouse is arrested, convicted, and we think, well, at least justice was served. But at the end of the day, wasn't this preventable? Did they really have to poison their spouse for money? About 12 years ago, I got really sick. To set the scene, I was working a lot. I was bartending at night and working early mornings in an office. I was around a lot of people, handling a lot of cash, and getting very little sleep. Common sense would tell me that germs plus little sleep equals sick. This was different though. Along with terrible headaches, something was desperately wrong with my stomach. I was having horrible stomach pains. I had to be very close to a bathroom all day. And no matter what I ate or drank, my stomach would bloat out so big, I looked 7 months pregnant, and it hurt. I limited my food intake as I didn't know what was causing this. The smallest bit of rice or even salad would make my stomach bloat out so big, and it hurt. I finally went to the doctor. My doctor ran allergy tests, tested for celiac, even Crohn's. They all came back clear. Now I know what you're all thinking. Oh my gosh, somebody was actually poisoning you? Let me put your minds at ease and tell you that I was. I had a very serious bacterial infection in my stomach. So my doctor sat me down and asked me about my daily diet. I told him I ate out a lot because, well, I worked a lot. I ate at the Subway down the street from my office because it was close. I loved my turkey bacon and avocado subs on whole wheat bread. I ate at Arby's, Taco Bell. He stopped me right there. He looked me dead in the face and told me, "You need to stop eating all of that immediately." Why? I asked. Because none of that is real food, he said. What do you mean? I asked. I was 30 years old, and this was the first time this concept was brought to my attention. How can food not be real? He told me I needed to stop eating the fast food and even especially the sandwiches and start putting real food into my body so that my digestive system could start to function properly again. He gave me an antibiotic for the bacteria infection and gave me food choices that would help me get my stomach back on track. I will say, I lucked out with this doctor 12 years ago, as I believe he was the first person to begin to shift my paradigm around food. We are all taught about food poisoning, or we learn the hard way. Most of us, by the time we hit 30, have had it at some point in our lives. We are taught from a young age to avoid undercooked chicken or food that smells like it's gone bad. We are taught to not leave food out overnight And working in the service industry, we are taught about the danger zone of foods. If we are taught about food poisoning from a young age because it will make us sick, why are we not taught about chemicals in food that could be affecting us in a poisoning way from a young age? Why is one education important and not the other? Why is one urgent, I should say, and not the other? As I began transforming my gut health over the next few years, I also began the deep dive into these questions. I started realizing that certain food companies are slowly poisoning us. And the difference between the sense of urgency in the education is, well, you could probably guess, money. If something makes you sick right away, and you know exactly where it came from, there is a good chance that you won't buy it again, or you won't go back to that restaurant for a while. But if this happens as a slow drip, and if the additive in the food tricks the brain into wanting more of it, there is money to be made. With a slow drip, it is more difficult to trace an illness back to a specific company, and there is less chance of backfire for them. For the consumer, that's a different story. How well do most of you know fatigue? How well do most of you know headaches, bloating, indigestion, constipation, dehydration, skin rashes, and joint pain? How well do most of you know migraines, anxiety, agitation, short temper, lack of focus, and brain fog? How many of you know somebody else who suffers from these things? How many of you know children who suffer from these things? And how many of you believe that all of these things are normal, that they aren't a big deal, and that suffering from these minor things is simply par for the course of life? Marketing is genius, and it gets better each day. AI, anyone? Marketing and social conditioning will have you believing that all of these things are normal and par for the course of life. Companies, doctors, and even other coaches will say things like, everything in moderation is how we should be living our lives. I used to be one of these people until I began the research of what we were consuming in moderation. And it's then that I realized that this might be bad advice. Each person's moderation is just not like the next. And big food, big soda, processed food, and big beer companies know this. When forced to address their ingredients, these big companies have a common recurring response. They simply say, don't worry so much about what you're ingesting, but about how much you are ingesting. Aligning with the belief system that we can have anything in moderation. Tell that to the spouse in the crime documentary. Don't worry about what you're ingesting, honey. You're getting it in moderation. An article in Weather 13 in Indianapolis featured an interview with a Purdue associate professor whose job is food safety. When asked about certain chemicals banned in other countries and if we should be alarmed by this, her response was, quote, I could see how that could be alarming. That, how come Europe doesn't allow something that we eat every day? And I could see the concern. But I think, too, it's all about how much of that chemical could actually cause illness. Unquote. There is an ongoing feud between two big-name beer companies. One saying that they don't use corn syrup in their processing, while the other does. Each interview I read concerning this topic of corn syrup being used in these beers had a version of a similar recurring response. I wouldn't be too concerned about the ingredients, but about how much of the beer you are consuming each day. As a former bartender, I can relate to this, as I was always concerned about how much people were drinking. Now, as a health coach, I am concerned about the ingredients that we are consuming over time. I wonder if this everything in moderation mentality is really serving us. Because what if everything in moderation is fueling this slow drip for money? And what if this slow drip isn't as slow as it used to be? In America, about 70% of people are currently overweight, with 43% of those people being obese. Diabetes, cancers, and heart disease are at an all-time high. If consuming corn syrup, sugar, and chemicals in moderation is okay, then why are these statistics climbing? Common sense would tell us that we are not consuming in moderation, or that the ingredients and chemicals are creating long-term damage due to the slow drip of consumption. Something other nations and countries are taking into consideration. So why isn't America? The Center for Science in the Public Interest, along with many other organizations, are strongly urging the FDA to officially remove Red 3 from our foods and medicines. California being the first state to actually put this in motion. Red 3 was removed from topical ingredients in 1990, but it was still approved for foods and supplements. Why was it toxic enough to ban for things that went on the skin, but stayed approved to be put into our digestive system? Red dye 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, and potassium bromate are all banned in other countries due to the known negative side effects that they produce, mainly in children. Yet due to a loophole in the system and out of convenience for American manufacturers, certain words were changed for regulatory purposes, and this allowed for these chemicals to continue to be added to our foods to this day. In no strange coincidence, these are now our products of convenience. These are our cereals, our sodas, our candies, and our fast and processed foods. These are the slow drip of chemicals that are causing fatigue, headaches, agitation, and hyperactivity. Combined with the sugar that has been slowly added to everything and that we are now officially addicted to, we are now a product of convenience. One that makes food and drug companies a lot of money. The negative side effects of this slow drip have us overweight, overtired, overstressed, overly depressed, and like the spouse in the crime documentary, overly confused. How did I get here? How did we get here? Self-talk. Does it really come from the self? Or does it get passed around from person to person? Influence from our peers, our colleagues, and our family matters. Influence we get from marketing matters more. You've earned it. You deserve it. Treat yourself. How many times do you hear a version of this advertised to you each day? How many times do you say this to a friend who's had a bad day? How many times do you say this to yourself if you've had a bad day? Or even if you've had a great one? Treat yourself has been a common statement used over the years for marketing. We have been told to treat ourselves with desserts, alcohol, and expensive purchases after we've had a long, hard day or a long, hard week, or after hardships in our lives have passed. This is where marketing shines. Professional marketing agents understand our reward system well. I can assure you, they have studied dopamine triggers and our primal brain function extensively. They know how we talk to ourselves. They know how we share words with others. They know that there's a sense of empowerment in these words. Treat yourself, because you've earned it and you deserve it. But what happens when treat yourself becomes treating yourself? How long do we treat ourselves with junk food, fast food, alcohol, and sugar before we are treating our symptoms of IBS, weight gain, depression, and diabetes? Awareness of how marketing combines with our self-talk is becoming more and more important these days, as we have endless advertising at our fingertips. Peer-to-peer marketing has become, quote, the new normal. And we are being taught to need the things that our friends and influencers and colleagues have. Keeping up with the Joneses used to be wanting the same lawn and lawnmower as your neighbor. Now, it's needing the same Starbucks order, video game, anti-aging kit, and Amazon wish list as your BFF and your favorite influencer. Fueled by the subconscious self-talk of you deserve it. You deserve it. I ask you to ask yourself this question right now. Deserve what? A common trolling statement that those of us who speak on this topic often hear is stop demonizing food. And stop trying to scare people into eating what you want them to eat. I can tell you from my heart of hearts right now that this is not a scare tactic. This is a mindfulness exercise. Even as a health coach, I don't want to tell people what to eat or what to do. I simply want people to be more mindful of these things. I am not here to prove anybody wrong or right. I am simply here to bring awareness to people, to help them make more informed decisions for their health, for their mind and their body. I simply ask you to pause before making the decisions on what you eat and drink each day. I encourage you to take a moment to look at the ingredients of the products you buy for you and your family. I invite you to slow down every now and then to give your undivided attention to the things that you consume and why. I wish for you to just take a pause every now and then and remember that you have a choice in every moment. And even the smallest choices can greatly affect your personal health. When you become more mindful of these choices, you will realize that you have been taught to believe that you are just too busy for these decisions. We have been taught to put our trust and our power into agencies, administrations, corporations, and organizations, when our true trust and our power should come from our own mindful decisions, ones that we shouldn't be too busy for. Our country is officially the unhealthiest and impersonal debt it has ever been. Treat yourself has become treating ourselves due to a false sense of empowerment. When do we realize that The empowerment doesn't come from treating ourselves at all, but from the actual choice to do it or not. True empowerment is saying you no longer accept the symptoms that you have been taught are par for the course of life. True empowerment is from the choice to be able to choose yes or no after you have the full knowledge of what is in your food. After you have the full knowledge of who is truly demonizing it. True empowerment is having a body healthy enough that you instinctively know when something you ate isn't right for it. Honing your intuition and true gut feelings comes from knowing the feeling of the body in its natural state, so that you can know when it's off balance. Again, 70% of Americans are currently overweight, while 43% are obese. Our country's health is off balance. Our country's health is not in its natural state. The symptoms you ignore, the fatigue, the headaches, the IBS, and the anxiety, these are your tickets to better health. The symptoms you numb with chemicals and ignore with screen time, these are your signals to become empowered. We don't have to be sick. We don't have to accept the slow drip. We don't have to make mindless choices. True empowerment comes in the form of informed and conscious decisions, devoid of marketing influence, peer influence, and in tapping into your own body's self-talk. True empowerment is being mindful of your decisions and taking back control of your health. Again, we don't have to be sick, because I promise you, we don't deserve it.